Hi everybody and welcome to the Unquendor Guitars workshop. My name is Daniel and in this video I'm going to show you what goes into making one of my custom guitars. And of course this guitar is going to be extra special because it's commissioned by one of my YouTube subscribers. So I'm going to do my very best to make this guitar as good as I can get it. And of course before we could start building this guitar I had to go back and forward with the client and really find out what his dream guitar would look like. And guys, this is the design we came up with and this is the guitar we're going to build. And if you're familiar with my channel, you already know I'm going to start by making the neck. And of course I start by making sure I get the neck blank as straight and flat as possible. And I use a straight edge to make sure everything is indeed nice and flat. And I use a little square to check if the center line of the neck is nice and perpendicular to the top surface. And of course I need to draw in a center line. And after drawing the outline of the neck, I'm going to measure where the truss rod is going to sit. Of course, I'm using my router to route out the channel for the truss rod. And once I'm happy with the fit of the truss rod in the channel, I take the neck blank to the bandsaw and rough cut the outline of the neck. And once I'm done cutting the outline on the table saw, I take the neck blank to the router table and clean up the outline. Because this guitar is going to be a neck-through guitar, I'm going to make absolutely sure the sides of the neck blank are nice and flat and straight and square to the top surface of the neck before doing anything else. And of course I do this using my trusty number 7 plane, and I'm checking for square and straightness with a little square and a straight edge. takes some time and some trial and error, but I really want to make sure I get this right because it's very hard to correct later on in the process. And now that I have prepared the two gluing surfaces for the neck-through construction to perfection, I want to make sure they don't get dirty or damaged further along the process. Before it's time to glue on the sides, I wrap them in masking paper. And the next step is to draw in the side profile of the neck and of course the volute. And now with everything marked on the side of the neck, I can take the neck blank to the bandsaw and cut the headstock break angle. And after cutting the headstock break angle on the bandsaw, I use a plane to clean up the surface and finalize the break angle. And with the headstock break angle done, I always like to drill the access hole for the truss rod. And of course, make sure everything fits nicely, and you can indeed use the Allen key to adjust the truss rod. And I like to use again my number 7 plane to get the fretboard to an approximate thickness. And to get to the final thickness, I use my drum sander to get the fretboard to about 1/4 of an inch or 6 millimeters thick. And for this guitar, I'm going to prepare the fretboard by first marking the outline and then cutting it on the bandsaw. And I want to be as precise as possible because later on I'm going to use these offcuts as the binding for the fretboard. But first I need to cut the fret slot, so I'm sticking the fretboard to a template and use a miniature table saw to cut the fret slots. And this is a very quick but precise way to cut the fret slots. And after cutting all the fret slots on the machine, I use just a handsaw to cut off the excess from both sides of the fretboard. Positioning the fretboard on the neck might be the most critical part of any guitar build. You want to make sure it's centered and the frets are running parallel to the nut and later on the bridge. So yeah, I always take my time and make sure I get this right. And once the fretboard is in place, I use a couple of locating pins to help me reposition the fretboard whenever I need to. And with the fretboard temporarily fixed in place, I'm using my router table and a rabbet cutter to cut a section that I can use to fit the binding on the side of the fretboard. But before we can make the binding, I want to do an inlay, and of course it's going to be the Unquendor tulip logo, and this time made out of a brass material. And after several hours of cutting, sanding and polishing, the logo inlay is done. And the next step is to create the inlay cavity into the fretboard. And to create my routing template, I trace the inlay design with a scalpel. After routing the cavity using my Dremel with a very tiny router bit, it's time to glue in the logo. Now that the logo inlay is done, it's time to focus on creating the binding of this fretboard. And here I'm using my plane to make sure the offcuts we just cut from the side of the fretboard are again nice, straight and square. And I'm using some black and orange strips of veneer to go in between the fretboard and the binding. So yeah, we have a multi-laminated binding. And now that all the pieces of binding are glued together, it's time to stick the binding to the sides of the fretboard. And I'm using some masking tape to keep everything in place. And after letting the glue fully set, it's time to cut away all the excess and finish the binding. And with a brass inlay, you need of course some custom made brass fret position markers. And these position markers are made from a 4mm round brass rod. And the last thing I need to do to the fretboard is of course sand in the radius. This guitar needs a neck break angle, so that's what I'm drawing here, and I'm cutting it on the bandsaw. And I can't tell you what angle it is precisely because it's a derived angle based on my building style and the bridge I'm using on this guitar. But as always, after every cut I have to clean up the surface. And now with everything done, it's finally time to glue on the fretboard. And these locating pins make it very easy to reposition the fretboard. After giving the glue enough time to fully set and fully cure, it's time to finally cut the profile of the neck. And always when you're recording a video, the bandsaw decides to stop cooperating and making these cuts very difficult. But it's nothing a quick cleanup with a spindle sander can't fix. And with the back of the headstock cleaned up and the headstock sanded to thickness, it's time to start shaping the neck. And usually at this point I have my customer present to fit the neck and to see if it really fits his playing style, if it's thick enough or thin enough, and if it's comfortable for him to hold. But yeah, my customer being in Japan and I'm in the Netherlands, there's a half a world apart, so we had to trust each other that I could make the neck to his specifications. With this scarf I had to take it very slow. I had to take frequent measurements to make sure I kept within specifications to both the dimensions my client requested and the shape. And I think in the end I managed to create the exact neck that was envisioned by both myself and of course more importantly the customer. And this is for me one of the most satisfying jobs to do on a guitar. That's carving the volute. Now that the neck is carved, it's time to start thinking about fretting. Well, of course, first thing I need to do is make sure that the fretboard is absolutely flat and straight. Here I'm using a tiny triangular file to break the edges of the fret slots. And this helps me to press in the frets, and later on in the guitar's life, if it ever needs a refret job, it prevents tear out when someone tries to pull out the frets. And for this guitar I'm using Blacksmith Phosphor Bronze medium jumbo frets. And because of the binding and removal of a piece of the fret tang near the ends of the frets, I make sure to press in those ends very well to prevent them lifting and maybe creating fret buzz later on. I like to keep as much of the fret tang intact, and that's why I go back and forth and only take a tiny bit of the fret tang off each time. When removing or cutting off the fret tang, there's a tiny burr left on the underside of the fret that needs to be filed flush, so the end of the fret sits nice and flush on the fretboard. And a tiny bit of super glue helps to keep the fret in place. And when all the frets are pressed in, it's time to remove the burr and make a slight angle on the fret ends. And then it's time for a very tedious, but in my opinion, very relaxing job. And that's dressing the fret ends and make sure there are absolutely no burrs sticking out and create the best player experience possible. And of course, who can play a guitar without side dots? And to fit the theme of the guitar, of course, they're also made out of solid brass. And although using a fret press to press in the frets gives a very good result, there's always a tiny bit of leveling needed. And I use a fret rocker to make sure all frets are nice and level before I really finish these frets. And the first step is to recrown the frets, or with other words, make sure the frets are nice and rounded over by removing the flat spot left by leveling the frets. And make sure the fret ends are nicely rounded over. And as a finishing step, make sure they're nice and polished. And one of the last steps I do to a neck before starting with the body is making the headstock veneer and the headstock logo inlay. And with the headstock veneer glued on and the tuner holes drilled, it's time to do the Unquendor headstock logo inlay. And to stick with the theme, it's also made out of brass. Now with the neck done, it's time to focus on the body, and I'm starting with cutting out leg limba. And with the body outline rough cut, I can take it over to the router table to refine and clean up all the edges. Template still attached, I can straight away go into routing the cavity for the controls. There's a lot of routing to do on a guitar body, and especially if you want to do an inlaid top, of which I'm routing the cavity right here. The inlaid top is a feature on almost all Unquendor guitars, and I think it looks great because it gives a false binding of the same wood as the main body around the edge of the guitar. All Unquendor guitars are fitted with active electronics, which are powered by a battery pack, and recently I started routing a tiny cavity and line it with a foam rubber to house the battery pack. And with the main body ready, it's time to focus on the top, and I start by book matching two halves of a nice quilted maple. And as always, as soon as the glue has fully dried, it's time to rough cut the outline of this beautiful top. And I use the masking tape and super glue trick to stick on a template so I can once again use the router table to clean up the edges. You might have wondered how this would be a neck-through guitar. Well, at this point I'm going to cut a section from the body where the neck is going to be. This is the only way I could think of to do an inlay top and a neck-through where the neck was visible both at the front and the back of the guitar. And again, I have to rely on my trusty plane to get a nice, smooth and straight gluing surface. And only at this point I realized that it would have been smarter to cut this part of the neck to thickness before gluing on the sides. But hey. After completing that very stressful cut and planing the back of the guitar nice and smooth, it was time for another critical job, and that's placing the bridge. After doing all that precision work of routing the pickup cavities and drilling all the holes and making sure all the electronics fit, it's nice to be carving the body. With all the carving, cutting and routing done, it's time to relax, take out a piece of sandpaper and start fine sanding the body in preparation for stain and finish. The big challenge with this guitar is to keep all the colors and all the finish types separated. We wanted the white maple of the neck to stay nice and clean, while we want to stain the quilted maple top a black. And of course we also need to pore fill all the black limba with a black filler, so keeping the filler, stain and white maple separated was a challenge. And that's why I'm applying a sealer right here on all the maple of the neck to keep that nice and clean before applying this black grain filler to the black limba and later on some stain. And after sanding back the black filler from the black limba, I'm once again applying a sealant on all the areas I don't want the black stain to get to. And after some additional masking, it's time to apply the black stain to that lovely quilted maple top. And now a big reveal if all the preparation of sealing and masking paid off. Coating the inside of the cavities with some conductive paint not only helps to some extent to prevent some unwanted interference, but once it dries it really looks nice and clean as well. After letting the nitro cellulose finish on this guitar cure for over a month, it's finally time to fine sand the surface real smooth before I can polish it up to a high gloss mirror-like finish. And it takes several hours going through several grits of wet and dry sandpaper and various stages of polishing to get to this result. And with that mirror finish on the guitar, that flawless finish, it's time to do a scary bit, and that's mounting all the hardware and get this guitar playable. So guys, here she is. Nyxia is finally done. It was a challenge, but I really love the challenge and I really love building this guitar. This is, however, a custom ordered guitar. It's a commissioned guitar, so I'm not going to play this guitar. There won't be a sound demo in this video because I really want the owner to be the first one to play her, to experience her. So no sound demo from me, I'm afraid. But yeah, I really hope you like this video, you like this build. And if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, as always, leave them in the comment section down below. And I read them all and I try to respond to as much as I can. And yeah, if you're new to the channel and you like what you've seen, please consider subscribing for more guitar building videos and content. But yeah, that's it for this video. I hope you liked it and I hope to see you all in the next one. But until then, take care and bye bye.